from okay, I'm from northern Wisconsin, Kashina. So I grew up on the Menominee Indian Reservation, and then also I'm also from the Stockbridge-Munsee community. Um, so in the past couple months, my husband and I moved to Nashville, Tennessee. So we're kind of between both, Wisconsin and Tennessee. So yeah, I'm joining you from Nashville. And yeah, um, well, thank you. So I was asked today to talk about tribal engagement, which is, my whole career. I started out in wildland fire. So I went to school in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I didn't know exactly what my career path was going to be after graduate school, and I started working in a fuels job for the Bureau of Indian Affairs in forest management. And I didn't have the fire qualification, so I started in wildland fire. So I worked, on a helicopter for a couple of years. I worked um, on a hot shot crew in Arizona, and I was trying to build up my fire quals, and I really never got into managing fuels or forest management. I spent so much time kind of building up my fire qualifications. I just kind of got lost. So I came back to Wisconsin, and I started working as a hydrologist for my tribe, and I think that's where I really got interested in working in wetland work. I'm doing restorations, mainly conversion of ag lands back to wetland areas. And then in the past 5 years, I've been working on my PhD at the University of Wisconsin. But every job that I've had or contract work that I've done, I've always worked for tribal communities. And even for me, being a tribal member working in my tribal community, um, it's difficult work. It's difficult work doing projects, getting everyone on board in the community. And today is just based off my experiences. If you maybe talk to other people, you're gonna get a different view. But I'm gonna do my best to share what I've learned over the years. Next slide, please. So there's pretty common challenges when engaging in tribal communities. So right now there's 574 federally recognized tribes. There's also state recognized tribes. Um, but each individual tribe is diverse culturally, linguistically. Their land bases are very unique. Their management goals, their strategies, their workforce, their leadership, all very unique to each tribe. So it's very difficult, if you're engaging with the tribe. Even for me as a tribal member, it's very hard to keep up with you know all the considerations that tribes have in their operations and in their policies and in their communities. And the best thing to do is just you have to just continue to be engaged and keep up with what's going on in the community. um, Historically, me as a PhD student, I thought that maybe I would have maybe a better angle at proposing research in the tribal community because I'm from there, right? And I worked there for many years and bringing some research and partners that were non-tribal from the University of Wisconsin to my reservation. I thought, this should be really easy for me to navigate, but it wasn't. And it took me a while to get people on board, and that was mainly because there was unethical research practices that had occurred in the past. Um, and I wasn't immune to like the challenges that came with that. So I really did have to work at proposing a strategy and making sure that I was being safe, so that my work was going to be protected in all the ways that the tribe required me to. So maybe some people are really effective at engaging in tribal communities if you're proposing research partnerships, or maybe you just want to do some consultation and solicit maybe feedback on policies or work that's being done. Um, Maybe you're really successful at it, maybe you're not, but I think that every time I've ever tried to do something, or even as a tribal manager, this has always come up. This has always been an issue. Hey, we've been burned in the past. Whatever you're gonna do to engage with tribes, let's make sure that you don't do that. And that means collecting data and sharing it, um, you know, to other agencies or that's not okay with the tribe. Um, Sharing pictures, of certain areas, going beyond the scope of work. Maybe entering areas that's trespassing. Those are things that I've dealt with in the past, but I'm sure there are many others. And then cultural sensitivity. So one thing I've noticed that I think a lot of if you're engaging with tribes or working with tribes, I think it's expected that you're not going to know everything about our culture or how our community operates. I think it's the present day cultural distinctions that maybe kind of put a wedge between us. I think a lot of times people don't know how to act, and I think it's true that what people from the reservation, we don't know how to act around scientists or other people. And that's true for me today too. I do. I feel really awkward in a university situation, even though that I've been a student many times. Um, in and I don't really know how to get past that yet. I'm in my 40s now, and it's still a little bit awkward. But when you're working with tribal communities, I think it's the just kind of present day cultural distinctions that trip us up and maybe forming the relationship that we want. Um, how do we get over that? I think it's just being honest about what we know and who we are and what our goals are. And yeah, maybe I guess maybe our lives on reservations are a little bit different, a little bit maybe slow paced. Maybe we don't always stay on task. Maybe if we have a visitor, maybe we want to show you other things that aren't related to maybe the scope of work that we're doing. Um, you know, Awkward situations, we like to joke. We laugh a lot. Everything is humorous. We like to bring in people. Maybe a lot of times, we don't make a decision on our own. A lot of times, we're gonna bring in a lot of different people to have a conversation. And it all depends, But I've seen, I think just the way we operate is much different than other areas. Next slide, please. So other things, alignment. So most of my engagement has been natural resource management. So I know that, maybe I don't know how you want to engage in tribes or how you do. Um, for the most part, I've been involved in people wanting to do research on a reservation or people soliciting consultation with tribes. So a lot of policy changes, or maybe just discuss what our needs are, or maybe how federal agencies can assist tribes. Those are the type of engagement that I've been mostly involved in. And I know maybe there's other, ways I engage. I'm just not familiar with them. But the issue is, and maybe that in those types of engagement, maybe where you didn't get the response you needed, is a lot of times, maybe your focus is way different than ours. And our tribal management programs are very broad needs. We get a very bit of base funding, and maybe we can do some very basic monitoring, and we're very stretched thin, so we are aware that we have a lot of needs. We're just not in a position to address a lot of things. And that goes down to capacity. We have limited staff, we have limited resources. A lot of times we can't allocate the time to maybe facilitate our research partnership, even though we do need it. We could probably definitely use your expertise. We could use the tools that you create. We could use the data sets because we're limited for sure, but we just don't know how, or we don't have the capacity to fit that into our programming. And I think that's the main reason in my experience why relationships with research partnerships maybe didn't didn't turn out how it could have been. A lot of times policies too is our policies for engaging with outside entities or agencies, they're still developing. Um, and I'll tell you just in my own tribal community, when an outside entity wants to engage in research or whatever, they have to go to a cultural committee to get the first set of permissions. And the template that's designed from that is kind of geared towards maybe someone that wants to write a book. So the questions that they base, their approvals off of kind of don't really apply anything to natural resource management or even health issues or, health partnerships. So I think that's an issue right there. And then a lot of times the people that sit on these boards are elderly folks who have a lot of knowledge and remember, things that had happened over history of our tribe, but they don't have the expertise that we need to really think about, what, this person has this expertise, and here are the management and data gaps that we have, and this is how we can really create this mutually beneficial relationship. So the approval process, just in my experience, is really limited, and we need to change that. So a lot of these things are on us, and we know that, but we just don't have the capacity to change it right now. And I can't speak for other tribes, but I do see it happening a lot. So a lot of times it's not you, it's us. Um, and I think the only way that we are going to change that is, the great tools or maybe data that you do create. It's just going to end up being that maybe you have to bridge that service a little bit more further to reach us until we can figure it out. And that's the best advice I can give right now. And face-to-face engagement. I know we live in a time where everybody likes Zoom, but really, if you're going to engage in a tribal community, um, the best way to build trust is to be in person, and that's going to go a long way. um, and I realize too, tribes are often in rural areas. They're probably far from your institutions, and that's a barrier. So, however you can swing it, I guess maybe a consideration for if you need to engage with a tribe or you want to work the tribe, just be prepared to do a lot of face-to-face engagement if you want a successful relationship. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I put together some questions. So how can we make these collaborations? And again, I don't really know beyond consultation or just kind of research partnerships how you might be wanting to engage with the tribe or how you work with the tribe. But I think I'm going to focus on just collaborations or research is, yes, we want to increase our access to data and technology and tools to enhance tribal management. We need that. We need those resources. Um, how do we do that? How can these resources be integrated into existing tribal resource structures in a way that supports us? So a lot of times we don't even know ourselves. As tribal managers, we know that we have a need, we have problems, and we'll say, you know what, yes, we do need this data set, but you know what, it's not going to just perfectly kind of just align with our management process or our programs. And so we kind of need like this, maybe, yes, let's maybe work together to create these tools or whatever we're working on. But then we also need a system where we can actually use it. A lot of times we won't have the data management capacity. A lot of times we don't have people in place that even understand what we're using. It, it could be many things, but we just have to make that extra step to really connect and make sure that we can apply the work to our tribal programming. Whose job is that? Is that yours? Is that ours? I don't know. I think every situation is going to be different. Do we bring in more people to make that step? Um, Maybe does that involve you just making a good hard review of maybe the tribal programming and have discussions and maybe it can get resolved that way? Maybe. Um, and then education outreach. So a lot of times we see opportunities coming through that, our students, can maybe get the training and skills through all these programs and they're great. I think, there's a lot more opportunities than I imagined there would be. And maybe when I was an undergrad, 18 years ago, I way more increased opportunities. But here's one thing is me working with students in the past 5 years. I think a lot of these opportunities need to be focused either more flexible to be on the reservation or within our tribal communities and not just, maybe at some agency or on a project that's unrelated to tribal management or tribal issues or needs. And also the products that we're creating or whatever it is, it has to benefit tribes somehow. Um, I don't really, and maybe just in my experience, I haven't seen what's out there, but that's just, a lot of times I see, when I go to conferences or people that connect with us, they're saying, hey, you know what, we got these great geospatial products, we're great. I mean, that's awesome, but I don't know how to use it. And I don't think we know how to use it. So next slide, please. So I have some ideas um, about collaboration. So mutual benefit beyond shared goals. So, okay, maybe you have this research idea, we need it. It's not gonna just perfectly align with maybe our management, um, operations. But I think we can still create like mutually beneficial relationships and move forward from that. Maybe, maybe rather than just putting together an article at the end of your work, maybe you can help enhance tribal capacity by doing a tribal report. Or maybe your work includes a report for the community. Or maybe you can help us edit a management plan or a project plan in addition to maybe the article that you want to write. Consultation. So here's an example. So I think a lot of maybe federal agencies, they want consultation from a tribe and they'll reach out to the leadership maybe through email. But those emails, usually they're assigned to maybe leadership people that don't have the background for this, and it rarely trickles down to people within the community or tribal departments. And we see this a lot, and especially like there'll be requests for people to serve on committees. A lot of times, like tribal leadership will assign people in leadership to committees, but they won't have the expertise. But there are people in the community that are doing that type of work. So I think it's really important if, like, in terms of consultation, that you have to reach out to the community too. And I understand, you know, yes, it's the appropriate thing to do to reach out to leadership, but do it both. Find out where community members are having events. We have powwows, there's feasts, there's like school events. I think that's gonna get you a long ways is starting to reach out to community as well. Capacity building focus. So I kind of already touched on this, but maybe your work has an extra component as in addition to writing maybe an article. Whatever that is, I don't know. Maybe you're gonna help the tribe kind of reorganize their data management system. Or maybe you're gonna maybe train somebody to use these systems. Maybe you're gonna train the whole workforce. Usually our departments only have a couple people in it. It's not like you're training 30 or 40 people. Maybe every week you train people how to use these tools that you make. And long-term commitment. Um, I think it's nice that people want to engage in tribes. I just think that it's a lot of work. And if you're gonna do it, it's probably gonna be a long-term commitment. But I mean that's up for discussion too. Next slide. Here's some more capacity building actions that I'm gonna suggest. So I just out of curiosity, like I just kind of Googled Menominee tribe, right? And of all the like kind of things that were published, I think I only seen maybe there were like 30 things that I've seen that were published that had to do with like tribal management or history. And there were only like 3 tribal members on all those articles that were like authors. And I'm gonna give you guys an example that I've seen that later on that is relevant to this, but maybe you take the time to really show manager how to them in your work. Um, Publication and report for the tribal audience. I think it's really important that whatever that is visible to the tribal community. Maybe you write an article for the tribal news. Maybe you just write something that can go on the tribal website. You need to be visible within the tribal community. Here's one example that I thought is like a knowledge exchange. So maybe every week or every month or whatever, you pick a set time. Maybe the tribe shares more information about tribal operations or things that you want to know about the tribe, and you share more about your agency or the work that you're being done in general, or the pathway that you took to get there. Present together. So as a tribal manager, usually we go to a lot of EPA conferences, tribal management conferences, BIA conferences. We're not like 10 AGU or ESA that often. but maybe the work that we gather, we present and we present at each other's conferences. And I think that would be really a good relationship building activity. Attend trainings together, document all discussions, actions, and list all resources. So a lot of times tribes aren't going to do this because we don't really, if you approach a tribe with a project, maybe we need it, but we don't really have the time, or sometimes we don't really understand what's all going on. And it's difficult to take notes or kind of create this record of what's being done. So I would suggest, taking the lead on document everything within the project, and maybe later on the tribe can take up, some of the work there, but um, take good notes for both of us, and then stay connected with young students and young tribal contacts. I think a lot of young people start out like me, we start work, but then we go back to school later on. It's a lot of us don't go to school right away. So if you're working with a tribe and you see young students, do your best to stay in contact. Next slide, please. Can you, ooh, my froze. Oh, there we go. So education and outreach. Um, so working with tribal students in the past maybe 5 years, I've done my best to connect students to like REU internships, a lot of off reservation opportunities that looked really great, and there's a lot of students that are interested. They just don't want to go alone. And I think that maybe we could overcome this by maybe if you kind of offer these internships to maybe high school students or undergrads, maybe we could do it more as like a group or cohort mentor approach within your programs. Maybe we take 2 students or 3 students from the same school, or and assign them to a mentor. I think that would be more successful for tribal students because maybe they don't have experience maybe living off the reservation yet. Maybe they've never worked with non Indigenous folks. They probably never there's a lot to navigate there. I even kind of get tripped up. Like I right now my husband and I were living in Nashville and we are so out of our element, and we're in our 40s and 50s, like it's just really hard for us to navigate things off the reservation if you live there your whole life. So that's just one suggestion I have. I don't know. I was involved with this program this summer called NICALC, which they kind of do use that approach. Every tribal community is able to send a couple students, and rather than just one, and every reservation kind of works as a team to do the activities, and that offers students a lot more support um, through the opportunity. So what tribal community events and programming can be leveraged to increase skill building? So just in my own tribal community, there's a lot of youth programs. And I think that, rather than reinventing the wheel, I think, if we want to engage with students, I think we could easily tack on maybe the training or just engagement, through helping build up existing tribal programs. How do you do that? You just have to reach out to people in the community. A lot of times tribal colleges, and then, like your youth programs, will have some kind of phone number on the website. But I think a lot of times people running these programs are more than happy to welcome in people. And from what I know, people are constantly calling me and asking, hey, do you know someone that does this that would talk to kids? Um, they just don't have the contacts. So I think that's a good way to improve education outreach. And then graduate assistantships for tribal students. Um, so I get a lot of emails, I'm looking for a tribal student to work on this project. And that's kind of all the only information that I receive. So like I don't really know we really need a background on this. What are we walking into? Is a tribal student going to take some kind of assistantship and have to manage everything? Are they in this role just because it's maybe easier for an Indigenous person to navigate all this stuff? That's not really necessarily the case, because I had a hell of a time navigating my own tribal community as an adult that worked in this place for 10 years. I really think that if we're going to offer graduate assistantships to tribal students, it really needs to be a well worked out agreement. and the support system has to be in place if they're like a go-between or liaison for tribal communities. And I don't know details, but we can talk about that more after too. And then one idea I've had is, if you have a project with a tribal community and you're going to bring on graduate students, it might be worth to like have a student that is focused on policy or culture, to pair maybe with the work that's being done. Just because there is a lot to navigate there. I couldn't do any kind of monitoring until I just, a ton of other things. I didn't know a lot about the policies that I needed to follow. I didn't know even about cultural standards that I needed to follow just to take some measurements or put a flux tower in my woods. Um, and I think that could have been that's a good experience for someone that is interested in policy or cultural focus. So it might be worth, depending on your project, maybe pair the work with disciplines. Next slide, please. Okay, so I thought this picture was pretty funny. I just found it on social media, but I'm going to give you two examples that in my career that have really resonated with me, and and the first one is, I'm not going to mention names, but a federal agency had come to our reservation and they had funded a project which we needed, and they were very helpful and they were really good people, and in the end, the project was communicated on their website, right? And then also they wrote an article. Okay, so then the website, it did have like all the project outcomes on, but they took a picture of one of the workers, right? And they really just they really focused on kind of making this picture like, up on these trees, and they really kind of hit like, and the trees will last forever, which is like a legacy of one of our tribal chiefs. And I get it. Um, but it really made the person feel uncomfortable to the point that like after people wanted to ask for his picture, he went and got like a younger student or a younger professional in the building to take pictures with people because he didn't want to like be communicated on the website, this cultural person, and the trees are gonna last forever. I think the thing is like, it would have been more tasteful if we just focused on the outcomes, on the work, on the field work, rather than kind of putting this picture, this kind of, tribal member looking at the trees and it's all stoic. And I know that the people didn't mean any harm, but it was a turnoff for the person that was involved, and it kind of took away from like, all the knowledge that, this person had built up for the field. Um, and and then the second thing is, I had hired some contractors to do some work, and one of the drone imagery that I used, when I got it back, they attached flute music to it, and it was nice. And, and people in my office, they're like, "Oh, that's cool," and it was, but in a way, it wasn't. And I think that a lot of times when I see presentations of people working with tribes, they're very quick to maybe put a powwow picture on there, or something within our like regalia, and they don't focus on the work that's being done. And that's really what should be like depicted, right? In my opinion, if we were gonna put music, I would have like opted for some Black Sabbath or something, going over the forest, like we were gonna go into the Super Bowl or something, not this flute music. So I think for the most part, people do want mean well, but I just want to be mindful that, what, I think a lot of us aren't even powwow dancers. A lot of us don't dress like this. You know what I mean? Um, we have our careers, and yeah, we know our tribal, conventions very well, or maybe we practice, but it's in private a lot. And there's not always a need to show, connect some kind of tribal culture to the work being done. And people might disagree for sure, but it's just in my opinion. I've seen many people kind of just get turned off, or just feel uneasy about maybe how they're depicted on maybe agencies reporting, and the pictures that they show that, hey, we work with this tribe, rather than focusing on the work. Next slide, please. So I just have these kind of two suggestions is to steer clear of romanticizing, you know, our culture. Um, and a lot of times too, I see this as, you know, struggling tribe. Yes, a lot of times we do struggle with our management or our needs. Um, but I think there's a better way to put it. And I think a lot of us can handle it, but sometimes people just kind of get rubbed the wrong way. You know, we need just kind of flipping it the script a little bit better and just saying, you know, there's room for opportunity or partnership rather than struggling tribe or just, you know, and then I already kind of said this, but showcase examples of reporting and presentations that really highlight the balance, you know, of our work. I think is really important. That's really the lesson here, and everybody needs to say it. Everybody needs to learn is, you know what, tribal partnerships or engagement, it can be successful, and let's really highlight that. Other than, hey, I worked with some tribe, I watched some Indians today. Look at the picture. You know, I kind of do get that feeling sometimes. Um, but that's just kind of my opinion. Next slide, please. Um, and so I just put some other resources on there for connecting with tribes. So in my position now, you know, I don't work directly. I'm not working for a tribe anymore, but Regional Climate Adaptation Science Center, so CASCs, they do a lot of this work. Maybe you're involved with them or not, but tribes are getting referred to these centers all the times with their needs. If they need information or they need, you know, tools, you know, for their management needs to direct them better or to maybe just kind of measure success. In my position, we're directing them to these centers. And these centers kind of, especially the Southeast Casco where I work with is, you know, they have a list of researchers that want to work with tribes. I don't think there's enough people on there. And I don't think that we do a good job of connecting these people. So maybe we can maybe start helping these casks, maybe increase the resources and people that they connect with to get the information that they need. There's regional tribal consortiums and commissions if you're not directly connected with the tribe that you want to work with or interested in working with. In Wisconsin, you know, I think there's a group called WICTAC, Wisconsin Tribal Conservation. Oh, I'm sorry. Conservation. It'll come back to me. And then now USET is United Southern Eastern Tribes, but there's all kinds of different you know, groups that have multiple tribes that are kind of working towards one goal, be it kind of health services or natural resources or whatever. I think they usually have, you know, conferences or events that you can connect with tribes, you know. And then there's also a regional Bureau of Indian Affairs tribal climate resilience liaisons who are connected to every tribe that know their needs, um, type of project work that would be suitable for them, and we're able to coordinate that. And then also, I would say me being in a new region, I get connected most by through tribal connections. You know, like I said, intertribal, but um, tribes work with tribes. You know, when I was a tribal manager, the first person I would call is the next tribe over. You know, do you know how to do this? Did you ever have to do this? So we know what each other needs. We know what the projects are going on. I would say the best way to connect with tribes is make sure that whatever it is that you want to do, make sure that tribes know what you're up to. You know, put a call to action out, you know, to other tribes and say, hey, if you know anyone that's interested, because word of mouth travels fast. Next slide, please. If I have one. Yeah. So here's my contact information, my email and my phone number. If you have any questions, more than happy to discuss with you. And I realized, you know, when I was making this presentation, it's like, how do you, you know, you really have to focus on specific needs or issues or situations. And I really wanted to make sure that I save time if you have questions, or maybe just, you know, want to have a discussion about maybe tribal engagement, because I only know, you know, a small, maybe I've only had experience with like a small part of engagement. You know, you guys might have, you know, way different engagement needs than I've ever been involved in. So I'd love to hear it if you have questions or want to discuss anything.
Thank you very much, Angela. That was wonderful, really useful, and a lot to think about, really practical suggestions and stories. Yeah, so as you said, we have plenty of time for discussion and questions, which is really nice. And I wanted to thank Ryan Emanuel for joining. He was our speaker the first one of these seminars. So thanks for coming back.
You know what? I'm sorry. I'm having a really hard time hearing you, and I don't know if it's me.
Yeah, Margaret, you're very quiet today.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's weird. Okay. Can you hear me any better? No.
A little better, but
All right. Well, if people have questions, raise your hand in Zoom. I'll be right back.
Go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, this was really interesting. Thanks for the great talk. I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about the science work that you've done with your tribe and kind of how that went over.
sure. So, well, recently, so I was employed as the hydrologist for my tribe. So our tribal community was worried about how water levels may change, or maybe how we would have to shift management if emerald ash borer. So we have extensive black ash and white ash crop in our forest, like thousands of acres that we haven't pre-harvested. So now we have invasive beetle emerald ash borer that's on our reservation that's going to kill the canopy. And we knew that when that happens, how our water level is going to change, but especially when parts of our reservation are like extensive wetland areas. So, I mean, that's something I didn't have an expertise on, and after, reaching a lot of people, I couldn't just find anyone that, knew or had any guidance for us. So I actually quit my job, and I said I was gonna, do a PhD program and try to figure this out. 5 years later, I'm still working on it, but I'll tell you, um, if I would have just kind of did a PhD project and focus on it, I probably would be done now. But it's the tribal engagement part that has really held me up. Like, I put flux towers on the reservation, just in itself, getting that approval to put, a semi-permanent structure on trust land was a very lengthy process. I had to get multiple approvals. To bring contractors on our reservation, I had to get multiple approvals. Anytime like I have an advisor or people helping me from University of Wisconsin come up to a reservation, it requires approvals. So yeah, and so navigating that process is very difficult, and it hasn't been easy, but it's a good experience for me. And I don't regret quitting my job at all. I don't regret taking this project work on at all, because it's been an excellent learning experience, and I understand maybe how other people, go through, because we do need your partnership. We do need that collaboration, and if things like this are so difficult, how are we ever going to have these successful partnerships? So going through this process kind of makes me have a lot of ideas of maybe how we can streamline these processes and make it easier for collaborations, hopefully. But yeah, I needed to go through it myself.
Okay, now I'm not muted. And how's the volume? Better? All right.
Better.
So
Better.
then I want to apologize for having an introduction that was a little too quiet to hear at the beginning. But I want to thank you again and tell you how excited we are to have you, Angela. And so since that
Yeah, I'm excited to be
come
here.
across. So Ankur is the next question, it sounds like.
Thanks, Angela, for presenting, and I really appreciate some of your very concrete ideas for how we can improve our engagements to tribes. One of the things, of course, and we've talked about this before, is about, AmeriFlux has had a historical, relatively open sharing data policy. And I know that kind of comes into conflict sometimes with how communities may want to be able to engage with Ameriflux. And I don't know, and has that been changing from your perspective, or like what recommendations do you have for being able to do Flux type research or in a very open science framework with tribes and communities?
Sure. Um, so I think early in the presentation, I kind of just talked about the process that maybe an outside researcher would have to follow just in my particular tribe, to get approval to do work, right? And that really kind of, in that process, limits us to understanding maybe our full potential of our partnership, right? And so I'll tell you, I think my Flux towers have been up for 3 years, and it's taken me that amount of time for my tribe to say, okay, you know what, you can register your towers with Ameriflux and you can share the information, but we're not going to let you say the exact location, which is fine. I can put, the forest cover type in there and we can share the information. But the leaders that were making this decision just didn't have like context. So I'm saying, and it took me a long time to explain to them, you know what? We take funds from the EPA and we collect basic water quality data, and they own that data, and we report that data back, and it goes on a website for everybody to view. Similarly, we constantly take other health related issues, data, and we share that, and it goes into other models. And I think it's just new things. Like my tribe had no idea, like what are you doing with these towers? How are people going to exploit this data? And I didn't really have the answer for them either. And I think it's going to take maybe someone within a program that really kind of sees the bigger picture of all the ways that tribes use data, and give them some kind of context. And another thing is too is they're really skittish about geospatial products, but we don't pay people to do that. People do it for us. So other people already have access, but I just think that the people making decisions, we just don't give them the information or communicate, like who's actually using this data, and where's it going. We just kind of give them like, hey, this is what we want to do, and this is why. But we kind of just don't give them that kind of big picture during the approval process. It's been my experience. So my suggestion is the most information possible to an audience that has no experience with any of this data, and really hit hard about what the outcomes are, what the benefits are. And really for me it was hard for me to get that, because I knew what the benefit was for my my research and my dissertation, but I still haven't had like the concrete benefit to tell my tribe, you know what, we should leave these flux stop towers up way after I'm done, because we're gonna have this data set that we don't have, and we can use it for this and this, and it's gonna go in, somehow it's gonna align with what we're doing in the future. I think it is, but I still don't have I can't guarantee that. And that's something that I've been trying to navigate. But if that answers your question, that's been my experience. We just kind of need more context to like how we use data, and just kind of pair it with things that we're already doing.
Thanks, that's super helpful.
Yeah.
Maybe now, just to take questions in order, we'll go to Kirsten Paff, if you're here, and you had a question about tribal communities looking for long-term research. Do you want to ask that, or do you want me to read that? Not seeing where she is. Just says, so this is in the chat, Angela, that
Okay.
she says, I understand that tribal communities are looking for long-term research partners, but most science research is based on short-term grants that have to be written quickly and rarely last more than 3 or 4 years. How have you balanced the fast-paced nature of modern science research funding with the consuming process of trust building?
Good question. I don't know, but I think that maybe connecting with maybe the consortiums or groups, in whatever region you're working with or want to work with, might have a better idea. Because I really don't know. It's a really good question. I think a lot of times too, here's an idea. So a lot of times, like when tribes receive money, you know, there's some kind of announcement that says, you know, this tribe is gonna got this amount of money for this amount of work. A lot of times when they get this money, they don't really have to have like an extensive monitoring program attached to it. Maybe we have to do like a quality assurance program plan, but you know, that's just for like a certain period. And I can guarantee you that most tribes don't have any kind of comprehensive monitoring for new project work, right? So if you see these kind of announcements and say, hey, you know what, I think maybe I can help this tribe, um maybe connect with them, and you already know their project work and maybe a proposal, and then you can work yourself in to that monitoring plan, and that will be maybe a good mutually beneficial relationship. And then you know, maybe you don't have to tribes get money for projects. You know, maybe you don't rely solely on maybe the sources that you're accustomed to. Maybe you jump on as a practitioner in the tribal community too, you know. And that's just my off the cuff answer. But that's what how I would foresee that working.
Thanks. And I wanted to thank or just note that Ryan Emanuel, our speaker from last time, is here again, which is really nice. Thank you for joining. And he has a nice comment in the chat, just reinforcing something that you had said. Kyle, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, thank you. That was really interesting and helpful. I was curious to get your thoughts on how to avoid cultural appropriation. So if you're working with tribal communities and, you know, as a scientist trying to learn from them and their expertise in different land management, you know, ideas, how do you, if you're going to then write a science paper or, you know, say we learned X, Y, and Z from tribal groups and working with them, and we implemented some land management and we learned all of this and it was great and we want to do this going forward. How do you avoid falling into a trap of appropriating that cultural knowledge? And how do you write a science paper that doesn't, you know, violate that trust or showcase Indigenous knowledge that maybe they didn't want to? Like, how do you balance all that?
Right. I think this is what's been tripping me up for a while too. I wanted to share all these kind of angles, right, of what I knew about my community and why this is important. And every time I kind of use that angle in my writing, it kind of like toss this out. And I kind of realized, all right, I'm just gonna focus on the work. You know, I guess it doesn't really, for this purpose, maybe it doesn't really, the background doesn't matter, even though I know it does. And the whole reason why I'm doing the work is because of the background or maybe the cultural relevance. I just think maybe in science papers, the less is more safe. And I think if you want to put cultural relevant you know, topics in your paper, I think maybe that comes from your co-author that's from the tribe or your partner. And that's the best I guess answer I can, because I really haven't figured out that balance either. How do I not, I want to share all the reasons why and how it's going to be helpful. But I just, yeah, I just haven't found a great way to convey that, you know, in the science measurements or work that I do. And I know that's not really helpful to you at all.
No, thank you. I mean, I have no experience in this. I'm just starting to learn, and you know, I'm sensitive to the need. And, you know, I give you, yeah, well, maybe I'll send you an email. The specific question that I have is, yeah. Anyways.
Yeah. I think I probably wouldn't do it unless your tribal partners ask you to reference something.
Yeah, I mean, I was more,
yeah,
I was more thinking about, you know, if you're working with a federal agency and a tribe and, you know, the land management that the tribe proposes, like you do an experiment, it turns out it's really beneficial for the landscape. And then the government agency wants to keep using that land management strategy going forward. You know, how do you make sure, like, if they want to keep doing this going forward, can they do it without the tribes or can they not? Or like, how do you balance that? Like, yeah, maybe I'll send you an email.
Sure. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Hi, thanks so much for sharing your experience. I too probably would love to pick your brain more about your recommendations. But
Sure.
I have a sort of a broad question of like, what could we do as the academic or like a Meriflux committee to kind of go beyond, you know, how we build, you know, we make flyers and stuff to talk to researchers and to talk to academics. So like, what can we do or what can we make as outreach projects or outreach products that could speak to sort of what what has resonated with tribal communities of how they connected to Flux data, what it meant to them, maybe more emotionally versus like through reasoning, to help them change their perspective about, you know, the data and what it represents and what it will be used for. So like, yeah, so you sort of mentioned building, you know, having outcomes that go beyond our interests. And do you have ideas of what that would look like, what like an outreach product could look like that we could work on as the Ameriflux committee?
Yeah, I do. So I think just in my experience as a manager and now in work that I do now, we have a lot of management needs that we just don't have the data for to direct like reasonable management actions and to really gauge our success or lack of success, right? And a lot of times the funding that we utilize, it doesn't require like any kind of like long-term data collection, you know. So I think if you were, I think a lot of tribes probably are unfamiliar with Ameriflux, right? Or you know, how are the data that you guys create helpful to us, or how I think maybe picking out projects that we kind of see on the front, you know, maybe like coastal erosion or flooding or whatever, wildland fire, and the types of management that we need, like restoration work. How can the tools or data that you guys create, how can tribes use that? I don't know the answer to that, but maybe we could just pick maybe a couple examples and create outreach um, you know, product that says, you know what, this is the type of data and tools we create, and this is directly, you know, relevant to this tribal management need, and this is how we can help. You know, that's my best answer right now.
Yeah, yeah, thanks. Yeah, yeah, as
Yeah,
you said, it takes time and you sort of have to lead by example. And it's really
yeah,
interesting to have examples of your experience that is definitely closer to the needs and sort of like the place
yeah,
versus, you know, our studies in cornfields somewhere else. It's very different.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Christy?
You mentioned a lot of the time people reach out to tribes and ask them to consult on policy changes and things like that. I'm curious if that is, do those initiatives usually compensate tribes for their time, or do they just expect you to participate for free, or how do these overtures usually look like?
I think it depends. And now I've only been on as a tribal manager. I've only been on a couple of data calls and requests. A lot of times I didn't have the experience to give the input or guidance that federal agencies needed. So yes, I have been compensated for time. But a lot of times this is our job as tribal managers, is to make these connections. So I wouldn't be so worried about that unless like you're requesting someone to make a trip. Um, but I think, you know what, I appreciate, and I think most people do appreciate that maybe federal agencies or whoever, state agencies or just groups in general, reach out tribes to, you know, for their input. I just think a lot of times we don't have the experience to give you that. You know, we're very shorthanded running basic management programs. Um, and a lot of times too, there's a lot of issues that I have a personal opinion on, but I'm not going to share it professionally. And I think in Wisconsin, like, the wolf issue was a big thing. And I think maybe that goes back to what I was saying. You know what? Maybe you'll have better luck reaching out to the community rather than someone in an official role, because then you'll hear it, you'll get an honest opinion from people. Um, yeah, it all depends on what you're doing, but I think there's a good opportunity there to always involve the community in what you're soliciting input for. If that answers your question. Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you again so much. And it was wonderful to meet you at the AmeriFlux annual meeting in Michigan a few years ago.
Yeah.
As navigating things, and it's great to hear what you're learning and doing now. And as everyone said, this was such good, thoughtful, and practical information that you shared.
Good. I'm glad.
Fun.
I was like, yeah, I can talk on that, and then kind of start putting together the presentation, and you're kind of like, I don't know if this makes sense, but yeah,
Yeah.
I'm open. Please contact me if you want to discuss anything. I'll share my honest opinion. Maybe hopefully give you some insight if you need it. So I appreciate the opportunity to speak here today.
Wonderful. And don't hesitate to refer people ask you questions to a general group, since we don't want to put you. I wondered if some of the questions put you in the position of speaking for the more broadly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
was really great. Thank you. And I want to remind people that we do have another ConFlux webinar coming up October 10th. And so you can read about that in the chat. But I wanted to make sure I said that. There's lots of great thanks and comments to you, Angela. So we'll leave the chat open for a minute. And just want to thank you again. It's really great.
Thank you. Yep. Thank you.
All right, bye everybody.
Yeah, great. Yeah.